Hello, sewing friends. I hope you'll enjoy watching this project. I'm turning these scraps into a bag. You might have watched my Wavy Quilting in Scotland bag project. And if you want to watch that one as well, you can see a similar project and also enjoy some beautiful scenery from the Isle of Skye. But this one's for a gift for somebody whose favourite colour is blue. So just get your scraps. They can just be long strips like this. They can be different lengths. And make sure that your piece of background fabric is bigger than you're going to need for whatever you're making. Put the first strip face up in the middle of your piece of fabric and sew it down one side. Select the next piece, and this is just plain fabric, so it doesn't have a right and wrong side. But if it did, you would put it face down and sew down the side. And whilst doing so, put a curve in. So just move the top piece of fabric, move the bottom piece of fabric, stitch in and out, just go with the flow and stitch an organic curve. Don't worry if your next piece isn't the same length as the first one. Next step is to press that second piece over. Once you've pressed that, select the next piece and put that one face down and attach it to the other side of your original strip. Again, putting in a bit of a curve. As you build up the strips of fabric, you don't have to do it every time, but regularly flip the work round so that you're not always adding to the same side. Continue to add pieces like this, and after you've added each piece, just press them into place. You can see me moving the fabric here so that it will be past where the raw edges are, where the previous piece wasn't as long as the one before that. Just trim off any excess, and you can use that later on. So the next thing to do is to give your piece of work another press. So just, haven't done it here, but trim off the excess fabric. Just make sure that it's pressed flat. If there are any wrinkles that you can't get out, it doesn't really matter because you are going to quilt this piece of fabric. So as you add pieces, rotate the work around so you don't always add to the same side. Flip it round and add to the other side. And this is because when you are doing what I'm doing here, which is adding the next piece, and it's just a good idea to put a tiny bit of tension on the top piece to help it flip over and curve. And that means that you will be putting a very slight twist on your piece of work. So it's a good idea to flip the work round, work on the other side, and then come back. You don't always have to add a piece at the beginning of the work. You can start part way down if you've got a shorter piece. But look ahead to see where there might be some raw edges like I've got here, and make sure they're covered. So where that stitch line is going to be such that it will cover up those raw edges. So always put a tiny little bit of tension on the piece you're adding so that it helps it to curve around. And for this reason, that's why you should add to alternate sides so that the work doesn't become twisted one way. It'll have a slight twist on it, but you'll be evening it out. After pressing, add the next piece. do need to anticipate a little bit. So I know that I've got a join coming up. So rather than having too abrupt an angle, just curve over slightly and work your way to the end. So once you've done that, just you've got some excess fabric there, and it's a good idea to trim that so that you don't have too much bulk. It doesn't have to be too exact, but just trim the fabric down a little bit. What you can do is if you have got quite a pronounced curve, you can just snip into the excess fabric to make it easier for it to lay flat. You can start to see the pattern building up. Point is to be creative and not take it too seriously. Just enjoy yourself, adding extra pieces of fabric and being creative. So here you can see I've added quite a lot of pieces now. Just trim down any excess like this and just snip into the curve a little bit. And this will help the fabric to lay flat. Just give it a really good press. I'm using quilting cotton, so it doesn't matter if it's used with a steam iron. And you can get it to get really flat. And in fact, if you do have any wrinkles, it's not really the end of the world because you are going to quilt this piece of fabric and you can just go over them and it'll hold them flat. Here's the pattern for the main part of the bag. You can easily copy this onto a piece of paper. And then that's one side of the bag. So I've got one side I'm using for my patchwork, and the other side I'm going to be using needle cord. So the next stage for me is to cut out some thermolam, which is kind of felty batting, not fused. And then I'm going to be quilting my piece of patchwork to it using the Vilesilene thread that I showed you in the first sequence. So just put that on top and just pin it in place. So I've threaded up my sewing machine with this glittery embroidery type thread. It's not entirely successful because it's a slightly stretchy thread and I'm not sure my sewing machine likes it. And I'm also not completely convinced that it is meant to be going in a sewing machine. But if you can find something that has a bit of colour to it or maybe has got varying different colours in it or anything shiny that can go in a sewing machine, it does make an extra special feature of this kind of patchwork. So I had to stop and start a few times, and eventually I switched to another fabric, which is a sort of rainbow coloured, more of a embroidery thread than a metallic thread, which was slightly less stretchy. But I ended up with a reasonably good effect. I'm using this blue needle cord for the rest of the outer of the bag, but you could use any furnishing weight fabric that you've got, so that the rest of the outer of the bag is a similar thickness as the quilted part. I'm going to be adding a fusible fleece to these parts. I'm using Vilesilene H640, which is a medium weight fusible fleece, but anything similar to that will do. So I'm starting by cutting out the gusset part of the bag, and you can see the pattern here. So place that on the fold line and cut round. Here's a fusible fleece that I'm using, and because I'm using up bits that I've got, I'm actually going to be cutting out two halves. It doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be one continuous piece. I'm just cutting it out in two halves, and then I'm going to fuse it to the gusset piece. So if you're using fusible fleece, fuse it to the wrong side of your pieces and use the manufacturer's instructions. That particular one I mentioned, it does say don't use a steam iron, but I must admit I always do, and it's just fine. So I'm also fusing some to the back of the bag. These are the 3 pieces that make up the outside of the bag. So let's now join them together. So I'm marking the midpoint of the gusset piece and the midpoint of the bottom of the back of your bag. Right sides together. Start pinning at the bottom, then pin to the top. Make sure that this piece down the side is straight together and there is straight together. So any slack, take up at the corner and put little pleats in and pin like you see me doing there. Then on the other side, pin at the top, match up the edges. I've got a bit of excess fleece there, I'm just trimming it off. Keep that side straight, and then any excess is up the corner to give you the gathers at the corner. So just ease it round and put little tiny pleats in, pin it down. And that'll go around the corner of your bag like that. Just put lots of pins in. So back stitch at the beginning of the side and then just sew all the way around with a 1/2 inch or 1 centimetre seam allowance. Cut into the corners to ease the corners and make the bag lie a bit more flat. Just do a few snips in the corners, as you see me doing there. The next step is to pin your outer quilted piece, mark the middle, and mark the middle of the gusset, and then pin at the top as you did before, and pin on the other side at the top. And then work your way around to make sure the sides are straight, and then take up any slack at the corners, put little pleats in, and pin them in place. Once that's pinned, just stitch as you did the other side, back stitching at the beginning and end. Snip at the corners to ease the corners as before, and then turn the outer of the bag the right way round. It's now starting to look like a bag. Cut out the lining exactly the same way that you cut out the outer parts of the bag. So you need 2 lining pieces for the main body of the bag and 1 gusset piece. You don't need to fuse any fusible fleece to the lining. Pin and sew the lining together exactly the same way that you did with the outer of the bag. So you've now got the outside and the lining of your bag completed. So place the lining inside the outer of the bag, wrong sides together. Line up the side seams, and as much as you can, put the seams flat, put them at contra ways so that you don't have too much bulk at the seams, and put a pin in to keep that secure. And then do the same the other side. And then so pin in place around the rim of the bag. Put lots of pins in place and make sure that the two layers of the bag lie neatly together. Now I'm going to sew all around the top. If you have a removable section on your sewing machine like mine, then just remove it and that will make sewing this part a little bit easier. Sew right around the top of the bag with about 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 centimetre seam allowance. And this is just to secure the lining to the outer of the bag. And the next stage will be to put a binding on the top and add our zip. And our bag is nearly going to be finished. I'm going to make my binding out of the same needle cord that I made the outer parts of the bag with that aren't quilted. So you can just see me indicating where the grain line of the fabric is now, and that's at right angles to the selvage edge. I'm just putting the ruler at 45 degrees to that line, and I'm just going to mark it with chalk. And then I'll mark out 2 inches, which is about 5 centimetres. Make a mark in 2 places, and then draw another line, and then I'll be cutting along those lines to make my binding. So the way to add the binding is to machine stitch it right sides together to the bag. I'm just demonstrating here that because you put it on the bias, the binding will have a bit of a stretch to it because you've gone across the grain. So you do need to handle it quite carefully so you don't pull it completely out of place, out of shape. So match up the raw edges of the binding with the top of the bag and pin it all the way around. Just leave the ends loose so that you can join them into effectively a circle before you finally stitch it down. To bring the 2 edges together and just use chalk to mark where the stitch line would be. And then I haven't shown this bit, but take it over to the machine and sew up those 2 ends first before you start. So you're effectively sewing a circle of fabric to the top of the bag. Once you've done that, fold the binding into the wrong side of the fabric and turn the end under, and then hand stitch it down to the lining of the fabric without going through to the front, and just do small stitches to secure it in place. Here's the bag with binding finished. You've got a nice neat edge on the outside because that's the side you sheen stitched, and then it's been sewn down on the inside and you can hardly see the stitches. Now it's time to sew the zip to the bag. I've just got an ordinary dress zip here and upcycling it from something, so you'll see me picking all the bits of thread off it. And I'm attaching it with a strong embroidery thread. It's not just ordinary polyester or cotton thread. It's quite strong. So you could use something like a button thread, or I just happen to have an embroidery thread in the right colour. So put the zip face down. So it's you've got the inside of the bag there, and then just start at the middle of the one side. So the puller of the zip is facing into the bag, and just start sewing in the corner there and secure the edge, and make sure, if like me you've trimmed a zip, make sure that you go over the teeth so that you don't end up pulling the zip puller off the end of the zip, because it's very difficult to get back on. So you can see that the zip puller is facing towards the bag, and I've got the bag inside out. So it's worth taking a bit of time over this. It is a little bit fiddly, but just do small hand stitching and take your time over it. You do need to turn a bit of a corner with the tape, as you see me doing there, and then line up the edge of the tape with the stitch line of the binding. Provided you do the close together stitches, it will be absolutely fine. So just carry on along the edge until you have secured the zip. Got some scraps of the offcuts of the quilted fabric without backing on it. And I've got a 4-inch square of this and sewn it in half, right sides together. And now just turn it inside out, but stop halfway. There's a whole video on how to make these flowers, which I'll link in the description, but I'll just quickly showing you how I did it. Once you've done that, you sew gather stitches around the raw edge, going through both layers. And then you leave the thread attached. It's a good idea to, again, use a strong thread. I'm just using the same strong embroidery thread that I've already been using. So do small gathering stitches all around the top and keep the thread attached for the next step. Get a piece of leather thong or cord, thread it through the hole in the zip, pull, and then put the flower folded edge first onto the cord or leather, whatever you're using, and tie a knot in the end. Then put the gathered end of the flower above the knot and pull the gathers tight. That's why you need strong thread. And then just sew through the cord and through the knot. Once you've secured it, pull the flower over the knot so that you're hiding it. It's just a bit fiddly, but just pull it over the knot like that. And then you're going to reattach the thread and just pull in 2 sides like that and then secure that with a very neat knot. And then go to the other corner, put a stitch in and join that to the middle, and then go to the final corner, thread a stitch, pull that into the middle as well, so that you have a sort of tulip. As I say, there's a full video on how to make these, including ones that are a bit more quilted and fuller. I'll link the video in the description. And then just tie off the thread, and I normally poke it through to there and then trim off the thread so you can't see it. So you'll see that I've attached the handles already. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the video where I did this to upload to my computer because it was too long. So I've linked another video from another bag where we use these handles. And here's the finished bag. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Even if you're not going to make a bag like this, that you've enjoyed watching me make mine. I'll be back soon with another project.